Here we go with stage 23. Biggest part of this is going to be participles and the use of adverbs. We're going to start off with the person, number, and tense of verbs. I broke this down with color so that you could see what was going on. Person and number are at the top. You can see person is going to be first, second, or third. Those are the greens. The endings for the first, second, and thirds are given. If it is singular, number is singular, you're going to have an O or an M for the first person. You have an R if it's passive, and I if it's perfect tense. For the second person singular, have an S if it's singular, res if it's passive, ist if it's part of the perfect tense. T and ter for third, with eat for the perfect. The plural forms, the number is plural. The person is first, and the number is plural. So first person plural will have mus, mer, or emus. For second person plural, have tis, mini, istis. At third person plural, you'll have intentor and erant. What your test is going to do is give you a word, and then you're going to have to deduce from that word whether or not it's first, second, third person, singular, or plural. They're also going to give you a sentence where they're asking you to complete a verb, so you'll have to find the subject of that verb and give it one of these endings. For the tenses down here, this is the one that I've used. This is the chart I've used over and over. You either have a marker, that's that first column for the present, imperfect, perfect, and pluperfect. That first column says, does it have a marker? Present doesn't. Imperfect has ba or ERA for the assumed words. Perfect does not have a marker. Pluperfect uses ERA. The second column is clues. Present, imperfect have no clue. Perfect and pluperfect have an S, UV, or an X. So here I've given you the two forms that we start off with, amare and amawi. In order to create a verb, I have to start with one of these two. I'm going to start with ama. Now, if I want to make this first person and singular, I'm going to start off with my O, right? So I cover up that O, I cover up that A with an O. I get amo. That's I love. Get rid of that O here. That would be present tense because there no marker, no clue. If I want to give it a marker, I put BA on it, and I want to make it third person and singular. I bring the T over. Then I have he was loving. Now, if I get rid of this here, if I want to make this perfect, then I can't use this guy. I have to use the perfect stem, which is amawi. So I bring the amav up. That's my stem. The I comes off. If I want to make it third person and plural, I use the erant. These blues are going to go with the perfect. All of the blues go with the perfect. So this would be they loved. If I want to make it passive, I go back here with ama, and I want to make it third person and plural. See, I get third person and plural. I use the untor at the end. I have they can't do the action, so they're going to receive it. They are loved. If I move that over and I give it a marker, like ba, and I have they were loving. We should be very comfortable with this. That's kind of just a short review. And I do want to go over something with you very quickly. If I give you a subject, for example, if I give you a ma here, and I don't give you the ending, but I do give you the noun we're, you would have to decide that, oh, well, we're belongs to the third person and singular. So you would choose the letter T to complete that underline. However, if I gave you puelli, you would have to identify that that is nominative and plural. Because it is plural, the number of my verb is going to change to plural. The person is still third. And so I would complete that with nt, the girls love. Now, if I need the girls to be loved, then I would use untor instead. Being able to complete a verb in this manner is like 4 or 5 points on your test. So make sure that you're good with that. And I'll introduce some practice for you here in a little bit. If I change it to this way. If I go like this, I see the V gives me a marker, or it gives me a clue. The ERA is my marker for the pluperfect. And now if I give it an ending, I can't use the reds for the perfect. I can only use the blacks for the pluperfect. I can use the blues for the perfect and the blacks for the pluperfect. So to end this, I can use third person plural, amawerant. I can use amaweratos. But I can't use this. That's a no-no. Can't use mer. And I can't use istis. The reds, will only belong to the imperfect and present. The blacks will belong to the present, imperfect, and pluperfect, and the blues only belong to the perfect. So make sure you're aware of that as you begin to try to break these verbs down. Next, we have identifying participles. Again, a chart that I've used before. We have present and perfect participles. That's all we have. We have a present active participle. As you can see, we have NS and NTIS. That signifies the present active participle. You can see that the NTIS equals the ing in loving. So amantis is loving. For the present passive, ain't got none. What? That's right. There is not a present passive participle. But we do have two types of perfects. We have the perfect active and we have the perfect passive. What I ask myself is, when I see something I know as a perfect participle, I ask myself, is it a deponent? That's the question mark. If it is, such as egressus, then it is perfect and active. If it is not a deponent, it is regular, then I have a perfect passive. Translations, having left for an active, having been is the key right here. Having is still used, but been is the key to create the passive voice, having been loved. Down here I give you three of these. Let's see if you can figure out which ones they are. Dictus is perfect and passive. Conspiciatorum is perfect and active. That's one of those deponents. And amantes is present and active. The first two do not have NS or NT in them. They cannot be present. Skip over them. Go to the perfect. Then I choose whether or not I think it's a deponent or not. If it's a deponent, it's active. If it's not, it's passive. Just a quick reminder about the uses of quam. We can use quam as a relative. So in this case, I have aram quam. So the alter which. Quam is a relative pronoun that refers back to the alter, aram. With a comparison, we can use quam with a comparison. Stulti or quam, dumber than, and then whatever your dumber than would go next. You can use it with a superlative. So quam celerime equals as quickly as possible. So as quickly as whatever is what that quam is going to be used when we get that double R, double S, or double L. We have exclamatory. So if we intro a sentence with quam and put an exclamation point at the end, we get how. Like, how dumb is that? Finding the antecedent, especially to the relative pronouns, but to any pronoun, really. Finding the antecedent is very important. What is the antecedent? Well, that is what the pronoun replaces. So I have in the first one, puella quam vidi pulchra est. The girl whom I saw is beautiful. Quam is replacing puella. So if I ask what's the antecedent of quam, you would say puella is the antecedent of quam. Now, they're not always that cut and dry. Sometimes you get words that we wouldn't think of as feminine. For example, modestus defictionem jacet quam invenerat. In this case, defictionem is feminine. Most of those words that have that ion in them are feminine. So if I ask you what the antecedent of quam is in this sentence, modestus throws the amulet, the cursed amulet, which he had found. Quam refers back to defictionem. So make sure that you're good with identifying both words that are obviously feminine, and words that aren't so obviously feminine, or masculine for that matter. Because we're using participle, it's also important that we know what the adjectives are modifying. In the first sentence here, I have quintus fortis ad alum ambulat. I look at fortis, it's an adjective, it is nominative, it is singular, it is masculine. It has to modify something that is nominative, singular, and masculine. So it modifies quintus, which is also nominative, singular, and masculine. I know that based off of those case endings. With participles, it works the same way, just like that adjective fortis. I'm going to change the sentence a little bit. I'm going to give the participle a direct object, but it's still basically the same thing. Quintus librum portans ad alum ambulat. Quintus, carrying the book, walks to the palace. Portans refers back to or modifies Quintus. Quintus is the one doing the carrying. He's the subject of portans, so to speak. Make sure that you can look at a participle and tell what it's modifying. If I replace quintus and portans with puellae and portantis, Same thing, portantis, nominative, plural, and feminine, modifies puellae, which is also nominative, plural, and feminine. Case number and gender must match for adjectives and participles to modify. How about I spell portantis correctly? And there we go. One of these days I'm going to get through one of these videos and not misspell something. That's probably not going to happen. Our comparisons of adverbs is also very important. I gave you a list kind of like this in class, but I want to go over it one more time. You have the positive forms of an adjective, like tardis, brevis, and Keller. To make those adverbs, the first thing I have to ask myself is it first, second declension, or is it third declension adjective? If it is a first declension adjective, like tardis, to turn it into an adverb, I'm just going to change the US to an E. So I get the adverb tarde. That is a positive adverb. Brevis and Keller are both third declension. Now, with third declension adjectives, I don't change the US to an E. I take off whatever the base of it is, the IS in this case would leave me brev, and I add ITER. Now, words that don't end in IS, like Keller, are just going to have ITER attached to the end of them. This is still positive adjective brevis, and then a positive adverb in breviter. Now, to make something comparative as an adjective, I add IOR to the root of the word. So tardior, brevior, and Kellerior are all comparative adjectives. To make a comparative adverb, I'm going to add IUS instead of the IOR. So tardius, brevius, and Kellerius are comparative adverbs. When I get to the superlative, it's a little bit different. For superlative adjective, I'm going to take the root of the word and I'm going to add issimus. And then that's for all three declensions. Brevissimus, Kellerimus. I get a double S normally unless the base of the word ends in an R or an L. That's why Kellerimus has a double R. Keller ends in an R, so you double the R and add IMUS. If it were to end in an L, like facilis, the base of the word ends in an L, facil, you double the L and add IMUS. Once you get to the superlative form, tardissimus, you basically do the same thing you did earlier. You change the US to an E to create the adverb. So tardissimus is the superlative adjective, tardissime is the superlative adverb. Translating the comparative adverb, we can use the word rather or more. So for tardius, I have rather slowly. For brevius, I have rather briefly. For Kellerius, I have rather quickly. Now I can use more as well. More slowly, more briefly, more quickly. For the superlative, I want to use the word very. For tardissimus, I have very slowly. Brevissimus, very briefly. Kellerimi, rime, very quickly. The biggest key to changing an adverb, getting the adverb translation, is that ly. You hear it on all of my adverbs here. Unless it's irregular in English, you're going to get an ly at the end. Speaking of irregulars, here's a blank chart for you. I would encourage you to make something like this because there are several questions that include this irregular positive comparative superlative of both the adjective form and the adverbial form. So looking at these blanks, go into your book, look these up, make a chart like this, and make sure that you know all of these. If you look at this chart, once it is filled in, it kind of follows some of the basic rules. In the positive, the US becomes bene, so you get an E at the end. Malus becomes male, you get an E at the end. Magnus, you get magnopera. That one's kind of weird. But in melior, peor, and major, all of them basically just change the IOR to IUS, with the exception of our favorite word, major, which becomes magis. Optimus, change the US to an E. Pessimus, change the US to an E. Maximus, change the US to an E. So if you learn the adjective, irregular adjectives, you should be able to get to the irregular adverbs. But make sure that you look at that list in your book on page 52, because there are some questions that include those irregular comparisons. Finally, I have a map of the baths that our stories are happening in. This is I believe this is from your book. It shows you where the temple is, where the altar is, where the spring is, the drain, the changing rooms, and all that stuff, and all three of the baths that would be available. What your test is going to do is it's going to give you pictures of things that belong in these areas. An altar would have maybe a sacrifice. A temple would have some kind of an icon of a god or something of that nature. Spring, what happened in the springs? We saw things thrown into the springs. We saw people drinking out of the springs, etc. The baths, that would obviously be where people would be taking baths. So read through your cultural section and make sure that you're aware of what's going on in each one of these areas. The pictures that they're giving are fairly obvious. The one that's not is the one that belongs in the temple. You're going to see basically the face of a god, and that's what belongs in the temple. So just make sure that you're aware of the names of these, because your book is not, or your test is not going to give you the names. It's just going to give you letters. Instead of temple, it's going to say letter A. Instead of altar, it's going to say letter B, etc. Character quotes are going to involve Cephalus, Cogidubnus, Nemor, Quintus, and Salvius. So think of the stories that you should have reread. Think about what was being said by those characters in those stories, and it really shouldn't be that big of an issue. We have Cogidubnus with his rant about Roman justice. We have Quintus with him trying to save Cogidubnus. You have Cephalus with his letter. You have Memor with his denial, and of course Salvius with his denial as well. So go over those, and it shouldn't be that big of an issue for you. Even if it is, I think there's only 4 or 5 of those on the test. Here's a list of English words that you need to be aware of. Clarion has to do with clarity, immotile, immobile. Incessant is nonstop. Incurable is obviously not curable. Venomous, it contains venom. An aberration is a mistake, usually associated with mistake by God. Commandeer is to take over by command, by order of the government. Gesticulate is to describe using gestures, usually trying to wear whatever you're describing. Omniscient has to do with knowing, all-knowing. Our God is omniscient, all-knowing. Retaliate is to do what is done unto you. So whatever thing is done to you, you do it to someone else. Now those words, clarion, immotile, incessant, incurable, venomous, aberration, commandeer, gesticulate, omniscient, and retaliate are all going to be associated with Latin derivatives, and that's what you're going to have to pick out. Circumlocutions is moving about, looking about in all directions. Administrator is a manager. Ornate is elaborate. Manicurist is someone who cares for one's manus, hands. Clarified is explain something explained. Errata is like mistakes. Commemorate is when we remember something. Interjection is an exclamation. And mandate is an order. Here are some Latin words: mandatum, taliscio, gere, ira, cura, vinima, aquarus, motus, cato, male, magnopera, palum, and multum. Go ahead and look those up. Make sure that you know what those mean. That will help you out with some of the word study. Cultural terms. Ageris is the people, the diviners. They look at entrails and try to determine what the future is. No, Ageris, that's wrong. Those are the guys that tell the future by looking at birds. Emperor worship, obviously worshiping an emperor. Horoscopes, telling the future using the stars. College of the Priest, that was the priests gathered in Roman state religion. Haruspex, again, somebody who divines. Omina, that's what they're divine with, the omens. So that first list right there, the Ageris, the emperor worship, horoscopes, college of priests, Haruspex, and Omina, you need to be able to associate those either with people who are divining, the use of astrology, or Roman state religion. So Ageris is a diviner, emperor worship, Roman state religion, horoscopes associated with astrology, college of priests, Roman state religion. Haruspex is a diviner, and so is Omina. Next we have the Lararium. That's where, in the house of the Romans, that's where their center of their worship would be, the Lares, or the household gods. Paterfamilias, head of the household. Penatus, those are the gods of the cupboard. Vesta is the spirit of the hearth. Defixio is a cursed tablet. Lumina is the spirit within everything. Pontifex Maximus is going to be the leader of all of the priests.
All right, you little numbskulls, it's time for the cultural section. I got up early in the morning for this, so you better get 'em right. What is the name of the protecting spirit of the Emperor Gedius? How superstitious were the Britons? Very superstitious. If you step on a crack, you break your mama's back. That's this kind of guy. How did the Romans affect the architecture in Britain? and the aqua source. They Romanized everything. They put concrete everywhere and columns and all that stuff you see in Rome. What was the trust relationship between Cephalus and Memor? Well, considering that he wrote a letter and sent it to the guy that Memor was trying to kill, I think that Cephalus did not trust at all Memor. How did the Romans treat religions of the conquered lands? They embraced them? Yes, they did, and they even integrated them into their own religion. How loyal was Cogidubnus to the Romans? Well, at first he was very loyal. The Romans give him stuff. He's the king. Yay. Now, not so much. They tried to kill him. What were promised offerings in exchange for favors from the gods called vota? How much weight did the Romans place in horoscopes? Romans believed that the stars in some way affected the way that the world outcomes. Would a Roman prefer the state religion on influence of the stars? Both. Both. They worship their emperor and they look to the stars. What was a horoscope? A horoscope was looking to the stars to tell the Hey man, you all right? Hey, guys, I gotta go. Hey, Mom, bring me the shovel.